Everyone, I'm so excited to welcome you back with Michelle Lee. Michelle rode across the Atlantic on her own last February, and she's 48 years old, and I love to mention that because don't we all just have so many excuses related to age? So she single-handedly rode the entire Atlantic from the Canary Islands over to Antigua. It took her 2 years to physically prepare, but from the moment she read this book called Rowing the Atlantic by Roz Savage, it'd been 2 years since she actually took the leap of faith and actually started to prepare for it. So let's say 4 years in the making with zero rowing experience. She was previously a massage therapist. And so on her way, she set a world record for the fastest female to row a 1 million meters on a Concept 2. And she was voted Australia's Geographic Adventure of the Year. And she was also the first Australian woman to cross the Atlantic. So she is an incredible woman. Her story is going to blow you away. The level of preparation that she did from taking this really audacious goal into something actionable and realistic there's just so many nuggets that I think you'll really appreciate. So her mantra today is, when you think you have nothing left, you still have 22 days, and start thinking you can, and you will. So here she is. Michelle, I am so excited that you're here. When I heard your story, there was so much disbelief, I was so astonished. I was like, I need to meet this woman. And so I'm thrilled. I'm honored that you're here. So thank you for taking the time. I hope, and I know that your story will inspire so many of us out there. And I know that you continue to do it, but there's just so much to share. And so thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on your podcast, and congratulations to you for daring to put yourself out there and make these, because that's a challenge.
It is. It's true, and it's true. And your story just keeps inspiring that in me. So thank you. I really, really thank you. So Michelle, I want to just jump right in and just let everybody know. So you rode, and I have to read this out because I can never pronounce it right, but it's the Talisker Whisky Atlantic Challenge in 68 days, and it's considered to be one of the toughest rows that have been done. And you did it last year in 2019. It took you 68 days. It went from the La Gomera, which is a Canary Island, all the way to Antigua. So please, Simon Sinek always says, start with the why. So what was your why? What? Because people were probably thinking, your life's perfect. There's no reason to have done something like that. So what was the impulse?
Yeah, so I always say, be careful what you read, because I was inspired by a book. I read the book called Rowing the Atlantic, and it plagued me so consistently and persistently for 2 whole years that I eventually thought, if I don't do this, I'm going to die wondering. And that was it. It was that simple. I just thought, you'll die wondering? Are you serious? What a waste. So that was it. I wanted what she did. I wanted what she had. I wanted all the, she triumphed over so many adversities and so many challenges and so many obstacles. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. So it wasn't a fairy tale book of, perfect seas and blah, blah, blah. No, she had everything that could go wrong. And I was like, every time she got back up, I was like, yeah, you go, girl. I want that. So I just got to copy it, right?
Which is interesting, because it wasn't so much, from what it sounds like, it wasn't so much what it was, but rather it was that feeling of falling down and getting back up and being immersed in this beautiful challenge. So what was the book?
It's called Rowing the Atlantic by Roz Savage.
Okay.
So she did this very race in 2008. So,
wow.
Years before me. And, same, she was from the corporate world. So that's sort of what resonated. And I think for me, I thought, well, she was nobody special. It's not like she was an Olympian. It wasn't so I could resonate with her. I could relate to her. Whereas maybe if she was an Olympian, for example, I'd probably think, oh, well, they can do that because they're someone special, right? And I just thought, well, if she can, why can't I?
Wow. Yeah. Oh my God. So I'm so excited to dive into that. Even just the fact that you would even think that and allow yourself to even dream that and make it happen. So I'm curious though, before we even dive into that, like who was Michelle before this book? Like before it all happened, what was your life like? Who were you?
Yeah, so my life was very predictable. It was safe. It was easy. It was cruisy. Self-employed massage therapist. I knew exactly what my week looked like, Monday to Saturday. I knew who was booked in every Monday. I knew, my clients were on a weekly, fortnightly, or a monthly time slot, and it was just carved in stone. So I
Yes.
knew what to expect, and I did nice things on the weekend. I went for nice big hikes or big rides, or something on a Sunday because I work 6 days a week. And I think I was happy with my life, but not satisfied.
Mm.
And it's that state of dissatisfaction that made me yearn for something more. And then I think just at that time when I read that book, it all happened at the right time where I was just like, man, you got to go and make it happen. It ain't going to just come to you. You got to do this. You got to commit, verbalize it, tell somebody, because now you got to do it. So, while it sat in my head for 2 years, it would, constantly come in here and annoy me. It wasn't until I verbalized it. And that's when I went, oh, I got to do this now.
So wait, who was the first person you told?
So my best friend, Claudine, I phoned her one day in May 2016 and I said, guess what I'm going to do? She goes, what? I said, I'm going to row across the Atlantic. She goes, are you girlfriend? She goes, how are you going to do that? I said, I don't know. I just got to get me a boat. And I honestly thought it would be that easy. I thought you'd just go buy a secondhand boat. You'd go and row it a few times around Sydney Harbour, get to know it. And then you'd get it to the start line and you'd go and row it at the ocean. I had no idea what was in front of me, and the commitment, the sacrifices, the compromise I had to make. My life had to change dramatically from the moment I said I'm going to do this. Financially, everything had to change. So and I think naivety is actually probably my best friend, because had I really known what I was getting myself in for, I probably would have actually been a bit too scared to commit. Knowing that there was going to be so many challenges, there was going to be so much hardship on the way. Here I am, I had to build a boat. I couldn't buy a secondhand boat. I had to learn to row. I'm not a rower. I had never rowed. So that was irrelevant though, because remember, I wanted what this girl had. So I just thought, oh, well, I go and I'll learn to row along the way somewhere, So
Can't be that hard.
So, there was 2 years of planning. There was a lot of hoops to jump through. Doing it with the Atlantic campaigns in that organised race meant that I had to do a lot of things to qualify for my safety. So, for 2 years I was doing courses. I was learning how to be airlifted from a life raft, learning how to stitch myself up in case I gash my leg open, because you are completely isolated. You are at the furthest point from humanity and land. You are 2,500 kilometers. They can't even fly a helicopter in to pick you up if you need rescuing. You are at a point where you just have to sit and wait for a commercial vessel to detour to come by. So you have to learn navigation, seamanship, so many things.
Wow. So going into it, did you feel prepared, or even after all these courses, did you ever feel like, wow, I don't think I'll ever feel prepared for this? Or did you feel like, okay, I'm ready?
By the time I got to the start line, I knew that I had ticked every single box. And I got to the start line, I said to myself, you absolutely have earned your position here. I knew that. I, reflected on all the sacrifices that I made, the hours that I spent in my boat prior. There are 120 qualifying hours that you must do. Well, I spent 5 months in my boat every single weekend, 2 nights. So I would go and spend Sunday and Monday on board, sometimes Tuesday. So sometimes I'd do 3 nights. So I knew my boat so well. And because I built my boat, I knew her so intimately. I knew every single bulkhead, every nook, every cranny in that boat. And, all of these things added to my confidence when I got to the start line. And then, at the start line, I sort of was talking to all the other rowers, and I'm listening to them, and they don't know what batteries they got. They don't know how many amps they've got worth of solar panel. They didn't know what bearings they had in their seat, their little, what their seat rolls back and forward on. And I just thought, wow, you have absolutely earned your spot here, Michelle. You've done the work. And, so yeah, by the time I got there, I definitely felt like I'd done the work.
Incredible. Every time I hear that, I still get like goosebumps. So how did your life have to change? So you said you had to, just because you were still working full time, or at least it was your own business, but you were still working, and you're saying every weekend you were out on the boat. So how was it a slow allowance of like the change, or did you just like?
No, it was quick because, I thought I really do need to reach out. I need to find somebody who's been there, done this. So I Googled, I'm thinking, come on, there's some other Aussie that's done this. So I Googled Australians, Atlantic Ocean row. I found one person, one name, and I shot him a message. And over months of chatting to and fro and emails, and he lives in another state. He lives, 800 kilometers above me in Queensland. He finally agreed. He said, I will be your coach. I will be your mentor. Whoa. So he also suggested that you should go and get the world record. You should go and be the fastest woman to row 1,000,000 meters on the indoor rowing machine. He said, because that's where you can learn to row. It will build your resilience. It will build your stamina and endurance and all of the physiological adaptations that have to take place to become that long distance stamina endurance athlete. I was more of a sprinter. So my training had to change. All the things I love to do, I did a lot of varied stuff. I did cycling, I did hanging, I did climbing, I did, my week was jam-packed with all alternative stuff. I had to stop all of it and just row. So for 6 months, I had to stick to a training program, which basically keeps you right on the edge of not quite enough recovery. So you're always tired. I had to reduce my days a little bit in here. So condense a couple of days a week, get all my clients in and pack them in 3 days or something. Because every Sunday I had to row for 8 hours. That machine, I had to sit on that for 8 hours on a Sunday, 6 hours on a Monday. It was 13 sessions a week. And, my job is energy, massaging, that's just all energy. And then, so I also had to get a flatmate in because financially I knew that I had to at least halve my costs. Mm-hmm. So, I was used to living by myself, and now I had to put an ad in the paper and get someone to move into my space. It changed so much just from, the training, what I used to love to do. Now all I was tied to that rowing machine. It was like the centerpiece in my living room, the rowing machine. Over the rowing machine. And then also start learning as well about the boat build. I had to decide what boat I wanted to row. Then I had to, and I wanted to get involved in the boat build. So while I'm rowing, I'm also getting involved in the boat build. So it was just a massive juggling act and thank God I did work for myself, because if I did work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, a business would have said, no, Michelle, this doesn't suit our business for you to have all this time off and us to be flexible for you just to drop it at the drop of the hat to go and do something because someone is all of a sudden available to help you. And that's the other thing. I had to get used to asking for help. So, I lived a life where I didn't need anybody. And in that Monday to Friday life that I used to live, I didn't need anyone. I was very confident, very competent. And now all of a sudden I'm door knocking and asking for help. I'm asking for, so I was in extremely unfamiliar territory. And let's talk, they say you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Well, I was there for a very long time in that really zone of discomfort.
And you bring up, sorry, go ahead, finish.
Like I look at all that and I think all of that was necessary in the 2 years lead up, because that was my resilient building project or phase. Do you know what I mean? Like it was all of that was sort of, and it also made me realize how much I wanted to do this, because I would have easily, if you're not serious about it, you just go, oh, you know, this is too hard. And you just give up. You just wouldn't even start building the boat. You know what I mean? And I think, so yeah, it was all really essential and it's part of the plan. It was perfect. The way it went was perfect.
Oh my goodness. There's so many nuggets there from just like what kept you going, understanding like that, but also like you said, like being willing to ask for help. I find that that's what we get so troubled up is like we get so stuck on that. So it's beautiful to say that you have to kind of surrender to, you know, I actually need help. Like I can't do this on my own. But I really want to ask you something. What is it like to be plagued by, because a lot of people, you know, I think we've all experienced an idea that's persistently chasing us and we don't do anything about it. And so I realized that at one point when you verbalized it, you surrendered to it. You were like, okay, I must do this. But what is it like the year or maybe the months after reading the book you said it was 2 years, that where you were plagued by this idea? How does that feel? What is that experience?
So the book, I'd constantly just open it up to a random page. I would just open a random page and just read one page. Then she had pictures in there as well, you know, black and whites, and I'd be constantly just looking at those. And then you're just imagining, you know, I used to put myself in that position, think, what would have I done when the all broke? Well, I reckon I would have done what she did. She sort of kept bits of broken oars and started using them as spares for the next broken oar and sticking them and gluing them together with bloody gaffer tape and all this. And made me even start thinking of like a toolbox and what you might need out there. And so, yeah, I don't know. I was putting myself in the position and imagining the scenarios that she was going through. And then also imagining that moment that, yes, I did it. That is, I think, where I really connected and got quite hooked on that idea, you know, owning that can do kind of, you know.
Of course. And actually, I think you mentioned something super powerful there, because it's almost like you prepped physically the 2 years after you accepted it, but even that mental preparation of imagining yourself seems like it was part of that same journey. That is beautiful. Because for anybody listening, like I want this to sink in, but Michelle had not rowed like a single day in your life before, correct?
Yeah, so I didn't know if I even liked rowing, you know. Like, amazing. I had no clue. And it was totally irrelevant.
Which is my next question, is like, how did you navigate around the doubt of even being able to do it, of your lack of experience, or any of those thoughts or doubts that might have come up leading up to the race? How'd you navigate that? Every
time I thought of, and you know, I was constantly fighting the imposter syndrome, I call it, you know, like little birdie that sits on the shoulder that will keep saying, you think you can do this? You know, I had to keep belting him down constantly. And it was every time you had a little win, every time you achieved and ticked one of the prerequisites, the boxes, he got a little bit quieter. Do you know what I mean? So all those little triumphs and all those little, you know, yes, did it, yes. You slowly are building your confidence in yourself and your self-belief as well. It was a gradual, progressive thing that, and then, you know, I just thought, I kept reminding myself, people do this every year. You're not, you know, trying to bust the 4-minute mile, you know, and you think how many years it took them to break that 4-minute mile. But once that was broken, it got broken weeks later and weeks later, you know, like it just kept getting, because people knew you can. So that was something that was really strong for me, is reminding myself that people do this all the time. Like, you know, this is an annual event that people sign up for, and they do get to the finish line. Yes, okay, there are some fails, but you can't focus on that, right? So I just kept focusing on the ones that get across. And I'm like, I got to be a part of that.
Oh my goodness, it's true. And in the depths of like moments where you felt like, I don't know what I'm doing, how'd you get yourself out of it?
I don't know what I'm doing in what sort of sense? Like when I literally didn't know what I was doing?
Yeah, when you were like, wow, like I feel like, you know, those moments where you're just took on a new challenge, you're like, am I in over my head? And you start to question, like, and and there's moments where you actually start to believe them before you're, you know, you start to really see from an outer perspective, like, okay, no. So
Yeah.
how would you pull yourself out of there?
Oh, there was plenty of moments where I didn't know what I was doing, because I always said, if I write a book, it's going to be called World of Firsts, because I was in a world of firsts. Everything I was doing was for the first time. So I think I just began to grow a fascination with this whole thing, with the, you know, the firsts and the, you know, I had to deploy one of my drogues when I was out there. And I had never had to do that in a real situation. So I'd practiced it in Sydney Harbour, and I knew that I could drop it overboard. I knew I could pull it in and stuff like that. But when I actually had to deploy it for a real purpose, I was saying to myself, how much do I put out? Do I put 10 meters? I don't know. So I put 10 meters out and I waited, and I thought, that hasn't made a difference. So I'm like, put another 10 meters out. And I'm like, oh, I just put a lot out. Next thing I'm putting 70 meters out, going, and you just got to be brave. And so I said to myself, just be brave enough to do it, Michelle. Just chuck it all out. You can drag it in if you have to. So, you know, that's just an example of, and there was so many times I didn't know what I was doing. And I just thought, you just got to be brave, and you just got to try it. You know, apply a bit of common sense first. Think about it first. Visualize what you're about to do. Play it over and go through the actions, go through the motions. That is so powerful. Actually, like, you know, I'd get all my stuff out on deck and I'd look at it and go, okay, once that's in, I make sure that I cleat that off, and I had it all in my head first, really clear. And then I went about, so it really pays to take a minute, breathe, look at it, and then go and do it. You know what I mean? Like, just take that little minute. So yeah, plenty of times I had no clue what I was doing.
I love your energy behind that statement. It's just like, it's so invigorating. So it's awesome. I wanted to ask you, how important did you feel like it was? Did you have a strong circle of support? Like, because I'm assuming there's probably a lot of people that thought it was crazy. And so I'm curious to see how you navigated around the people in your life.
Early on, I realized that I had to create some kind of a filter and sort of filter whom I let in, because I don't know how many times I got told I was crazy. And, you know, to me, that was probably one of the most offensive things you could say to me, because to me, crazy was someone who just went and did it without ticking any boxes. They had no clue. And I thought, I'm not crazy, man. I am learning the skills that are required to preserve my life out there. So, what was the question?
No worries. So no, how'd you navigate with the people around
yeah.
you?
So I had my very tight-knit circle, and you know, you learn very early on who's going to be your rock and who are the people who you just need to put on the outside, on the outskirts, and maybe limit your time with them. So I had to be very selective on whom I brought into my little circle. And then I also learned that you need to just go to the top. When you're seeking the assistance and the help, and when I made a phone call, I just needed to speak to the boss, thanks, because I don't have time to stuff around, and I need to get it right the first time. So I couldn't speak to someone who, you know, anyone who said, oh yeah, I've had a little bit of experience with that, I've sold one to someone. No, that's not good enough to me. I need the boss. I need the big expert in this field, please. And, you know, so you had to get very, very clear, very direct. You almost feel sometimes a little bit arrogant as well, because you honestly, when you're doing something like this, you don't have time to get it wrong. You don't have the budget to get it wrong. Or I didn't have the budget to get it wrong. I didn't have the time. Everything was, you know, you always needed another week for every single stage that I got to. It was like, I just wish I had another week, one more week. You don't have it. So, you know, and I think the best piece of advice I got was getting very close to the pointy end. And I'd been told many times, even to my face, someone said to me in my circle, she said, if you get to the start line, I don't think you'll finish. So, you know, you've got all these little doubters and naysayers doing their bit that, you know, you already got your little birdie that you got to shoo off. Now you got these people. So I thought, you know what? I've actually got to start listening to people that have been there and done it. Not these people that have never got out of their lounge chair to go and do anything adventurous. So I then rang one of our big, very popular Aussie adventurers who sea kayaked across to New Zealand. And I rang him and I said, I'm just struggling at the moment with this, this and this. And I've, you know, all these doubters and blah, blah, blah. He said, Michelle, I'll tell you what, why don't you make 2 lists? Your absolute perfect world list of, I want to get this done. I want to own that. I want to have this. I want to blah, blah, blah. He said, and then have another list with your absolute life-saving, essential, non-negotiables. You have to get this done before you get over there. He said, now chuck this one away. He said, because guess what? You're never going to get your perfect world. And I was like, that is the most refreshing, the most reasonable, logical, sound advice that I've had. And that then allowed me to let everything else just ricochet off me after that. And I thought, geez, I wish I spoke to you earlier. But there's the lesson there. It's just really filter who you have. And why you're not taking advice from people that you know would never get off their lounge to do something that's a bit, you know, outside the box. Why are you listening to them? And yeah, go to people that have been there and done it, that can offer you real, great, logical, sound advice, you know? Tried, tested, proven.
Oh my gosh, wow, those nuggets but it's so true. It's like we often can take advice so easily from people that would not or have not done similar things. So it's true about that filter. It's and dealing with a little birdie. It's
yeah.
So I really want to dive deeper into like the preparation, which you've kind of alluded to, and we kind of went into more detail. But I'd love to understand a little bit more about. So you have 2 years, more or less, and what were the systems that you put into place right away in preparation? I know one of them is I think you had a coach at some point. So what were some of the systems that helped support you? And I believe like even signing up for the challenge itself, like also gave you a good checklist through which to work with. So just to give us an idea as to like when we're embarking, like what are some good frameworks to have?
So I lived by a whiteboard. That was what I used in order to, you know, like often when it's all in your head, it is overwhelming and you don't know where to start. No. I still do this now. And I'll feel like I'm in a tiz and I can feel my heart rate racing and I've got all these things to do and I feel guilty if I sit down and have a cup of tea because I should be doing. And then when I actually sit down and write it on a whiteboard, it's never that bad. So dumping stuff on the whiteboard and, you know, ticking it off as you do it, and be flexible. That was another thing I had to learn. You can't be super rigid. You have to accept that you may not get all that done today. So some of that stuff will carry forward and then tomorrow something might be a bit more important. So you're going to slot that up there. So be flexible. Have some kind of an accountability tool and something that also just helps organize what's up here, because it's never that bad when you put it in a list. So I'm a list girl, always carrying a little book with little lists. I do it now. And also for those moments in the middle of the, you know, if you can't sleep because your mind is so busy because you've got so much going on, you've got to do this, all this stuff. Well, I would wake up and just dump it on the whiteboard. And then I could go back to sleep because I've put it away. I've put it somewhere where I'm not going to forget it now, right? So I had to come up with all these like strategies that enabled me to function normally, you know, to some degree. And yes, having the right support, you know, yes, my coach, my mentor, he had been there, done it. So he obviously could give me some, you know, the sound advice that I needed. And then because I also did it with an organised group or, you know, it was professionally organised, they had their own checklist. So everything's about checklists. And yeah, just every day you got to do a little bit. Everything, you got to keep that momentum going, because when you stop, it's so hard to, oh, where was I up to again, and get the ball rolling again. If you keep the ball rolling, and it doesn't have to be fast, but you just got to plod along. You just got to do a little bit every single day, chip away, and you do get there. You absolutely do.
Wow. I again love that. There's a lot in there as well. So talk to us a little bit about kind of accountability. Who did you feel accountable to, and what were your systems there?
Yes, so I was accountable to, obviously, to my coach. So if we look at, say, the world record, the 1,000,000 meter, what I did with that, I used it as a non-negotiable. I had to get that world record. And I put that in place for myself. I said to myself, if you can't achieve this world record, you're not rowing across the Atlantic. So I put a lot on the line, you know what I mean? And so that meant that it made me super diligent and disciplined to the program. So I said to myself, even on Christmas Day was a Sunday for that year when I was training. So that program was 6 months. And Christmas Day fell on the Sunday. And my friends all said, oh, Michelle, that was my long row. That was my 8-hour scheduled row. Oh, you don't have to do it on Christmas Day. Just skip it, Michelle. And there I am in a camping ground under the tree with my rowing machine, doing my 8-hour rowing shift on Christmas Day, because in my head, if I did not do this and I failed, I'd forever be thinking, well, you dodged the program. You went and you changed the program. You didn't stick to it. So I think by putting something on the line that's super, super important, that'll keep you on track. That was a massive accountability for me for that aspect. And then for, getting prepared to get to the start line, well, I had invested so much into that anyway, like on a financial level, I had invested every cent that I've got, went into that boat. My business suffered for that as well. There was so much stuff that had to be compromised that, again, I wasn't going to fail for anything. You know what I mean? I'd put so much on the line. And I think this is what you've got to do. You've got to be invested. And then no matter what, you ain't going to let anything stop you. By the time I got to that start line, there's nothing that was going to stop me from crossing the finish line except, a capsize where I couldn't, and my boat didn't self-right. That's game over. But, for everything else, no way. I knew I was going to find a way.
Wow, I love that conviction. That is powerful. It's what they say, you got to take the island and burn the bridge. Sorry. Yeah, and burn the boats, burn the bridge, so you can't go back. It's beautiful. So what was the mental preparation like? Because, from what I read, you're talking about huge waves, potentially huge storms. There's a lot that could happen, and you're on a boat that's not really even that big. So what was the mental prep like? Not just physical, but now speaking about mentally.
Because there were so many things you can't mimic and mock before you get there. So I knew I could never see that 10-meter wave. Training in Sydney Harbour, I was never going to see that. So I used to train visually. I used to use the power of visualization by Googling the world's biggest storms, hurricanes in the Atlantic, and I would look at what it might look like, the wave action, and then I would imagine my boat on there. I'd imagine me in my cabin. I knew that I had a little a Velcro strap that I could tie myself down so I'd be nice and secure. Knowing my vessel, I knew that my cabin was watertight. And I just used to say to myself, okay, so in that case, it's going to sound horrendous. I knew that. The noise inside your cabin with the water and the wind and everything slamming against it, I knew it was going to be noisy. I knew it was going to sound scary. So I developed some strategies to get me through those, so meditation. I had lots of meditation stuff on my iPod, which I now know off by heart. I don't know if you meant to, but I know them all off by heart. And then NLP, I used to use some tapping, EFT, emotional freedom technique. So I basically had a little bit of a toolbox that I could go to. I had homeopathic remedies for anxiety, for seasickness, for exhaustion, for you name it. I had a homeopathic, I guess, first aid kit. But all of those things just, I thought, well, you've got strategies, you'll be okay. So basically I used in my mental training, it was a lot of visualization. It was a lot of going to worst case scenario. I would go straight to worst case scenario and work backwards from there. And that way I felt like I'm ready for anything. Do you know what I mean? I used to sit in my cabin with my eyes shut and practice grabbing, I'd say, okay, get your grab bag. Now I want you to go and get a day's worth of rations. Now go and get your torch, get your head torch, get your signaling mirror. And I'd be there in the dark, like with my eyes shut, just grabbing all these things. So I knew exactly where they were in the event that my cabin was upside down. I was in the dark and all hell had hit the ceiling. So yeah, doing things like that, that's how I train. And I also looked at what other rowers got wrong. Things like scalding is popular, scalding their hands with their jet boil. So our cooking facilities is just a little gas cooker where we basically boil water, we add it to the dehydrated meal, and we eat the mush from the bag. You can survive on it. So a lot of them, because you're on an unstable platform, whatever, they had burnt their hands, or they burnt the top of their foot where they've dropped it and it's burnt the whole top of their foot. So, and then they're out for days because their foot has blistered raw with boiling water. And now you've got to try and either put your foot in a shoe because it's got to go in your foot, or under a strap, or they burnt their hands. So I installed little baskets so that I would be putting my food in the basket, and now I could have two-hand operation to pour my water in. And I just thought, I've got to eliminate these really obvious things that seem to happen every single year, Someone suffers with a burn, someone suffers, or their skin irritations, they suffered with skin irritations. And I thought, well, they're not using any fresh water to wash themselves. They are getting across with nothing but a wet wipe, a baby wipe. That's all they're using. So I made sure I rinsed in a little bit of fresh water every single day. And before I finished every single rowing shift, I would rinse myself with a tiny bit of fresh water, or just even wipe myself with a cloth that I'd wrung out with fresh water, So yeah, little things like that is how I prepared. But the isolation factor mentally, I did not prepare for that. So, and it ended up being my biggest struggle. I was worried more about preparing for the sleep deprivation. So I did a lot of research on that, on sleep deprivation. Do you train for it or don't you? Or do you just cope when you have to? And the one thing I didn't prepare for was isolation, because I thought it was going to be my heaven. I thought, I'm going to love this. You're not going to get hounded by emails, by having to get back to someone on your phone, on your text message, and social media and all that crap. I thought that it was going to be my heaven. So I did no preparation for it, and I did suffer.
When you say suffer, like, what do you mean? What did that feel like? Because one of my questions is like 68 days at sea, like you're by yourself, like water on this side, water on this side.
Yeah, look, some days, so up to day 23, I had a ball. I loved it. And then after day 23, I thought, I'm a bit over me. Is this all you got? And then by day 46, which is noted as worst day ever in my diary, I did a little log every single day, and it was just a couple of sentences each day. But on day 46, it's in big capital writing, worst day ever, exclamation marks, and I think that's the day that I actually really did realize that this is a survival challenge. Everything was going, well, not everything. A few things were going wrong. I had a few things breaking on my boat. I had a toothache. I had an earache. And that's when I started to really go, this is bigger than running around my neighborhood naked. So, yeah, I think, and for the next row, for my next thing, I am definitely doing work on the isolation factor, because it was like a sense of deep despair. I just remember my heart. I remember saying, my heart, like, it just hurts. I just want my people. You know, that was one of the things that when I look back on all my footage, that was a really common thing. I kept saying, I just want my people. My little group, my little circle of friends, and, you know, my support that saw me get there. It sort of really made me realize how much I do like people.
Funny,
so there was a lot of lessons that I learned about myself. You know, I learned all the what you get out of inclusion, and, you know, what I learned out of having to ask for help and stuff, and, you know, being independent and all this, I don't need anybody. Well, man, life is so much richer when you include people, and people want to help. So it's like I had to do this to learn those lessons. Otherwise, I, to this day, wouldn't know, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
That whew, lots there. Day 46, and that wasn't, you still had after that like 22 days. So I can almost imagine what those 22 days were like post. So I'm curious, before we actually like go right into a bit of the actual experience, I have a few questions on that. Did you have a specific objective when you were crossing, or was it just to finish, which is, I mean, amazing in and of itself, but I was just curious if you had something in mind.
Yeah, I did. I wanted to finish in 55 days. I had 55 as my number, and I think I did that for a few reasons. One, I knew that it would keep me accountable, right? You know, I'm chasing a number. And when I did the world record, I was chasing a number. So I was already really familiar with the motivation that gives you when you're chasing a number. So I thought it's important that I put a number out there. And I knew by day 40, 45, I knew it wasn't going to happen, because our conditions were not favorable. We were getting pushed too north and too south, and we just weren't getting pushed west like we should have been. So, yes, I did. I wanted to finish in 55 days. I forget what your question was.
No. But which meant like 14, you had to row how long every single day?
So I rowed for 14 hours. So from about day 7, up to day 7, I rowed about 10 and a half hours, which is honestly all I could do. It's all I could really manage, because you actually are getting match fit and event fit each day. You're getting a little bit more event fit, more match fit, you know. Your stamina and endurance, they're building as you go. And you're becoming more mechanical and more efficient. That's just a fact of, you know, when you apply the stimulus, your body will adapt. So that was all happening. And then by about day 7, when I realized that some of the other solos were getting more miles than me, I was like, I wonder what they're doing that I'm not doing. And I thought, I need discipline on this boat. So that's why I then pulled out my whiteboard, and I used to record every single rowing shift. And I thought, you need to increase your hours on here now. So, and I felt ready to do that after, you know, that sort of 7 to 10 day period. I felt ready to do that. And so from definitely day 10, I rowed 14 hours a day on a scheduled whiteboard, which I recorded into my little logbook, which is kind of like my memento of, you know, my trip.
Oh my goodness. When you look back at that, can you still feel the emotions when you look at the photos, or when you look at what you've written down? Does it still feel very much alive?
Yeah, totally. It does, especially because I've decided to go again. It really does. And, you know, just looking at a clip, a footage, and I sort of looked at some of my worst days, and I really did question myself, why are you going again? You know, why do you want to do this again? But, you know, I'm driven now more by the fact that I know that I can do it better with what I know. So, you know, had I known then what I know now, I would have had a very different time. And I feel like I owe it to myself, I owe it to my boat to go and give it another crack and, you know, spend the time refining and tweaking the boat, getting her up to scratch and getting her, you know, more efficient. I've got to be more competent. I've got to get, you know, step up as well. And I like this regime that it creates. When you commit to something like this, I actually thrive in that regime and the discipline and the, you know, looking out. It's great for your brain, you know. Otherwise, what am I doing? I'm just doing easy. I'm just doing, like I said, my life was predictable. It's easy. What do I get from that? I don't get a lot out of it. I'm just going through the motions. So I've accepted and realized that I need to always be doing something that's bigger than my 9 to 5, you know.
I really hope that message that you just said really sinks in, because it's true. It's easy, and it's like, and that there's this saying that some structure adds a lot of freedom, and it actually gets you where you want to go. So that's powerful what you're describing there. So what was the worst thing that happened out there for you? Like, walk us through that. It was it a scenario?
Probably
Was it emotional?
The biggest plaguing, stressful fact was my autopilot and my rudder. So on day 44, I realized that my rudder was, there was a bit of play in my rudder, and I could hear it while I was in my cabin. It was making this massive clunk, 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 clunk. And I was like, oh, what's that? So, you know, next thing I'm waiting for the calmest sea where I can climb out of my hatch through the ceiling and look down at my rudder. And it took me quite a while. I had to stare at it to see where it's coming from. And the movement was probably 2 mil, not much, right? And I'm just watching it go, and I'm like, oh, the realization that my fittings on my, and I thought, okay, that's fine. Just go and get your spinner. But I couldn't, because of it was below the waterline, and I didn't have a long enough arm to reach over. You had to put a screwdriver in this side, and on this one you had a spanner on the inside fitting, and I couldn't reach. So I couldn't tighten it. There was no way I could tighten it. And I just had to listen to this banging. And, you know, of course, I'm going, worst case scenario, what if my rudder just falls off? How am I going to finish the race? You know, blah, blah, blah. So that was, and my autopilot, just wanting to keep her happy, because, you know, all of the stuff on board a rowing boat has been adapted from a power boat or a sailing boat. So, you know, this equipment wants to do 7 knots and above. We're doing 3 and below. So they labor, they work hard, and they burn out. So I was constantly worried about her, and how can I keep her? I used to call her my angel. How can I keep you happy, darling? You know, and I'd always be changing the direction or the my angle of my boat to the wind. So I'd done a little bit of sailing before this, so I was aware of maximizing the angle to the wind, you know. So I'd put my boat on the tightest angle I could hold that would help me maintain west, and then I would, you know, set that bearing into the autopilot. But sometimes she'd go a bit berserk, so you'd always be adjusting. I was always adjusting to keep her as happy as I possibly could. So they were my biggest stressors, really, to be honest. And then, you know, other stuff that would come and go was obviously the isolation factor, wanting the human kindness. I really missed human kindness, acts of human kindness. So being able to make you a cup of tea when you come off your rowing shift. I really yearn to be doing something like that. Like, or someone saying, oh, here, Michelle, I filled up your water bottle for you, sweetie. You know, that's the things that I really, really missed. And obviously, because I'm a massage therapist, touch was another thing. And I look at my footage, and there's so many times where I'm saying, I just want to cuddle. I just want to give someone a cuddle, you know. And these are the things that I will now take to my mental coach. So I have employed someone to work with me up here, because now I know what my weaknesses are. I didn't know what they were before I left. And that's another reason why I feel compelled to go again, is because if I fix all these things, I'm going to have such a different experience.
It's true. And I'm so curious so actually, I know I'm jumping ahead, but when are you planning to do the Pacific row?
So that's June 2021 next year. So June or July is the best departure time. So it's pretty much dictated to by being able to get out of, off the west coast of America and out from land, from the landmass. So that's the big challenge as a solo. And you pretty much need a good 8 days worth of perfect conditions, favorable conditions, to be able to get off that continental shelf and not be pushed back into land. That's the challenge. So yeah, June, July, they're your best dates. And you basically have to be at the start line, be at your spot, ready to go as soon as you can see. And you'll be monitoring the weather like you can't believe. And as soon as you can see this is it, you got to go. You just go.
Oh my goodness. And how long is this one? Is it longer or is it shorter?
So this one is
longer.
Yes, 14,000 kilometers, whereas I just did 5,000 kilometers to get across the Atlantic, or 3,000 miles. So this one is 8,000 miles or 14,000 kilometers. So
you're doubling the distance, Michelle.
Yes, 2.5. Yeah, 2.5 times. So it'll take me, I've got to anticipate 360 days. So I will have to provision for 1 year. I might be able to knock it over in 9 months. I don't know. It depends on the weather. The weather dictates largely.
So it's a whole, well, ideally 9 months, but it's a whole year. And is it a race? Like, is it an organized race? You're doing this solo?
No, so this one is, I'll be solo. I'll be unassisted, independent, and non-stop. So this will be the first time a female has gone non-stop. So others have done it, but they've stopped at Hawaii, then they've stopped at maybe Japan, then they've gone, so they've made hops across the Pacific, where I just want to go from A to B, no stopping.
Wow. And which point to which point?
So maybe around San Fran, Monterey Bay is a good departure point. I haven't studied that. There might be a better spot, but I haven't got, that's on my to-do list, is to really study the, exit, and then come into somewhere on the east coast of Australia. And again, because you're going to be out there for maybe up to a year, you're passing through all seasons. So I don't know where I will be. What is our weather doing up and down our coastline at that time when I come in? And that will dictate where I end up in Australia. So I may end up north, right up north. I'm a Sydney girl. Of course, I'm going to try and aim for Sydney. But if it's blowing southerlies, I'm just going to get blown north, and I may not get into Sydney. So again, you probably won't know till you're about that sort of 500 to 1,000 miles out,
Michelle, you are remarkable. Oh my goodness. I'm writing down this date because I will be there in support. I am so excited for you. I can see the enthusiasm. This is just, wow. And it's funny because one of the questions I had was, would you do it all over again? But of course, there's no question there. So actually, I wanted to ask you just a few things on the curiosity side. So actually, just speaking logistically, like how you mentioned that you were able to clean yourself up with some fresh water, but how'd you get fresh water? Like, how were you able to carry 60 days worth of water? And how did you do basic bathroom needs, all these just human things? What were some of the systems you had?
So I had a water maker on board because you can't provision for 60 or 90 days. You can't take enough. So it's a little electric water maker that produces 5 litres per hour. And I would run my water maker. So it's a desal. Basically, it's got a big, you drop a hose through the hull. There's a fitting that you slide your hose in, which acts like a straw. So that's sucking seawater up. It then feeds it through a series of membranes under very high pressure. It spits out the brine, the salty water, and then the good water, the fresh water, is then decanted into, your 10-litre container. So I basically would do 10 to 15 litres per day. Each meal that I ate, that required 300 to 400 mils of water. So they're quite thirsty. They require a fair bit. I'd be having 4 of those a day. Then, of course, what you're drinking, I reckon I probably drank between 4 and 6 litres a day. I probably drank. And then I would bathe in very extravagant 750 mils. So I would fill up a black drinking bottle. It was black plastic, about that big. I would fill that, and I would then leave it sitting on my deck in the sun. So it was nice and hot by the time the day was over. And then I would have a little tiny lunchbox that I filled with, that much water. And then I would use a sponge with soap from the lunchbox and suds my body up all over, get all that sunscreen off from today. And then I would use my 750 mils just to rinse myself. And it was plenty. It was ample. It's very extravagant to be doing that, because power is, it's all about conservation and preservation. If your batteries don't have enough amps in them, you can't run your equipment. So you sort of prioritize all the time. And you think, well, I need 12 amps of power to operate my water maker for 3 hours. To make my 15 litres, I need 12 amps. So then you start to, you had to know all your calculations of how much all of your equipment cost in energy, so that if perhaps there was a few days where you had clouds and you weren't getting all that beautiful sun into your solar panels to fill up your batteries, then I might turn some other systems off. I might turn my autopilot off. I'd turn my chart plotter off. I'd do manual foot steering instead of using my little electric angel. And and then my toilet, which was probably one of my most favorite pieces of equipment, because it wasn't electrical, it wasn't mechanical, couldn't break. It's just bucket and chuck it. It was a simple. That's it. And then other things I loved was my pump. I didn't have an electric bilge. I had a hand pump. And again, so simple, no mechanics to it, couldn't break. I had a couple of spares. They were a couple of bucks, and I swear they were the best piece of equipment that I had on that boat, out of, can't break kind of thing. Reliability factor, good. The simpler, the better.
Yeah, I can imagine something, because you're saying it's all a managing of energy, preservation. You're just like, so the simpler and the less chances of it breaking down, the better. Wow.
I found routine. Routine was really important. So, and I stuck to what I found. What I did on day 2 stuck with me the whole trip. So I was religious. I would have my little shower bath thing at 6:30 every night. Then I would air dry. I'd row for 2 hours naked. And then at 8:30, I put my oars down and I would cook my dinner. And then I would have 2 more hours of rowing before, at 10:30, I would then stow and store my whole deck, put everything away, go and put myself in my cabin where I would sit and have my cup of tea and a pudding every single night. I'd have a pudding and a cup of tea and just sit there with the hatch open, looking out, on a full moon, how beautiful. Or when the stars and there's no clouds, I just sit there and just be in awe of, and, you'd reflect over the day and you'd think, what can you do a bit better tomorrow, that sort of stuff.
Wow. That is incredible. And also, like you said, because the routine, one of the things I read on about this challenge is that rowers actually, that you row 2 hours, you sleep 2 hours, you row 2 hours, but like with the beating sun, like I can imagine there's certain points where it's like so warm, or is it not at all?
Yeah.
Like what was your sleep routine?
So for me, I just treated it like work. And I said, and because I was solo, I didn't have to work in with anybody else. So I never went into my cabin in the daytime, and I just said to myself, right, you'll be out on deck at 5 or 5:30 a.m. and then you'll be in bed at 10:30 p.m. You're just going to do what you do, right? And you'll just treat it like a normal job. So I pretty much stuck to that routine the whole time. And I know that the other crew, I don't know where they got that from, 2 hours on, they all do it though, you're right. They do 2 on, 2 off, and they just rotate that throughout the whole of their journey. So, the crew with 4 rowers, they generally get across the line in about 40 days. But for 40 days, they will have 2 people rowing and 2 people sleeping, and they just keep every 2 hours, 2 on, 2 off, 2 on, 2 off. If you were on my boat and I was in a crew, there is no way we'd be operating on a 2 on, 2 off, because to me, what can you do in your 2 hours off? By the time you've boiled your water and cooked your food, you've gone to the toilet, you've wiped yourself down, you've cleaned yourself, and you get in bed to have a bit of a kip, you're lucky if you're getting an hour's kip. So if you were on my boat, we'd be doing 6 on, 6 off. You can get some decent sleep there, or it might even be 8 on, 8 off. I just can't see the sense into it. And no one seems to question it. They all just seem to do it because that's what they did. That's what, I don't know. Or maybe I'm talking out of, because I've never done it. So maybe it does work. Don't know.
But sometimes some things are just done because they've just been set as a rule, and we don't question it. And then someone comes along and says, well, why do we have to do it that way? And then things change and just evolve and become better or a different option. So, wow, that's so now I'm curious. So now you've done this. So in the experience now, in all its glory, in the pain, in the challenges and everything, what do you think it's gifted you? Like, what would you say, who are you today that you weren't, what would be like almost 3 years, well, 2 years, 3 years ago, when you started prepping? 3-4 years ago.
Yeah. Definitely resourceful. I've learned that where there's a will, there is a way. So every time there was a roadblock or something that's a challenge that's come, I always found a way under, over, around, and I used to say, there's plenty of ways to skin a cat, So it's made me realize, it's probably made me be more resourceful, but it's also made me realize that I am. And one of my friends says, oh, Michelle, you always land on your feet. Like, don't worry when stuff goes wrong. She's like, you'll find a way. My friends just have this like inner knowing that you'll find a way. And I do, you just do. So I guess that my resilience was being built with every single hardship that came my way. And that, I love that as well. I love owning that. Determination, definitely my determination. And I think just knowing what motivates me, I've learned what motivates me, and how to use that finish line as your motivation. I've learned you just got to keep playing that over and over in your head and really connect with it, really want it. And, these are the things that now I've learnt work. That's probably what I've learned about myself. I think that resilient factor, and if you tell me I can't do something, that even just makes me dig my heels in even harder. My thought, I might smile at you and go, okay, yeah, but my thought bubble is saying, screw you, I'll show you. So I use that as motivation. So the naysayers and stuff, you sort of, I use that as motivation. Yeah, bring it on. We'll see.
That's amazing, because you are so known for saying, start thinking you can and you will. So what does that mean to you?
So it was, you had to come up with something in the beginning. You had to have something that was a little bit catchy and a little phrase that sort of summed up what you're about or what you're doing. And I thought, well, you know what? That was given to me by my coach. He actually came up with that. And I was like, that is perfect. Mm-hmm. And it's where I started from. It was with a thought, and it is true. Think you can or think you can't. You are right. Mm-hmm. Either way. So it resonated with me so much. And I was like, yeah, that is pretty much what this was built on, it's the foundation. And it works for everything, that is applicable in anything you do. So it's a great way for me to finish any speech. It's like, you know, start thinking you can and you will. It's that I'm living, walking, talking proof. Okay. You know?
It's beautiful. And actually, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, Michelle, if you don't mind me asking, like, how old are you?
48. I turned 48 in August.
Because, you know, your life, I mean, in today's world, you're obviously still very young. And it's like, but a lot of us put a lot of limitations on age and being a woman, and so many different factors. Like, I think life excuses come from everywhere. So it's truly an inspiration to have women and just humans like you doing what you do and showing us what's possible from going from nothing in terms of experience to just sheer determination and desire and excitement. I can see that so much in every way that you speak about it. And you almost make me want to be like on the sea, like rowing with you there.
Yeah, awesome.
So it's powerful what you're saying. And I really hope people pick up on that. So I wanted to ask you, you obviously have this very exciting project coming up in June of 2021. Is there anything we can do to support you? Anyone listening to this, anyone is there any way we can support you?
Yeah, look, I mean, these things don't come about without help. You know, like I said, we call it solo, but and you know, without my sponsors, I wouldn't have got there. There's no way financially I would have got it. So I guess, you know, and the people who I did attract on my first row, they simply just loved the story. They loved that whole, you're just going to give it a go, you know, like that's something really big here in Australia. They just love seeing people give it a go. So, and I seemed to attract that kind of a person, and they were like, we'll help you, we'll give you some, you know. They didn't care if their sticker was on the boat. They didn't care if, you know, there was you know, all this stuff, media and all this sort of stuff with it. So so really, I guess sponsorship is definitely available if anybody's interested in this. Flag being flown across the Pacific. And you know, whereas before it was different, I didn't have a boat, I didn't have equipment, so basically I was after everything initially. I needed, you know, all my equipment, I needed all my safety, I needed blah blah, my courses, and a lot of that got given as gift in kind. You know, people fit me out, people, you know, signed me up and did my courses for me, and had one of my clients pay for my flights to get there. So sponsorship is pretty much available.
Because how much does, like, for example, how much does something like this cost? Like, because I don't even think people can imagine. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for this one, it's about 100,000 Australian dollars, 100,000. Wow, okay. And that is just, so that's, you know, my food. The big ticket items are my food, shipping the boat to the start line, airfares, obviously, to get me to the start line, my safety equipment, and my medical kit. She's going to be a hefty price as well. I need another water maker, so, you know, redundancy on my boat. So I need to spend a little bit on the boat. So, you know, a water maker is like $6,000. So yeah, about 100 would certainly, you don't get a lot of change out of that.
Woo! Let's go, everyone. I'm going to do the best that I can to make sure that this community supports you 100%. So I'm really excited. I will definitely leave your details, of course. And I'm curious, when you think of your story, what is the message that you're hoping to inspire in women?
It is just give your dream, whatever it is, that thing that's plaguing you, seriously start thinking you can, and you will. Start visualizing it. Imagine your life if you don't do it. Use that as the motivator and the fuel, and give it a go, man. What do you got to lose? Like, I really just want people to live their dream, because for me, that is freedom. You know, living your dream is giving you so much freedom, and the enrichment that it's given my life, what I've learned, the people I've met, the skills that you acquire. Like, man, get out, bust out a 9-to-5, man. That'll always be there. Yeah. But there's so much more outside of that.
Wow. That, You get me so excited. I love this. Now, Michelle, is there something that you'd like to say before we part? Any parting words of wisdom or anything that you feel like we missed on this interview? I feel like we covered a lot.
Well, firstly, a massive thank you for having me, darling, and to all your watchers who invest time to see this. And also a couple of the things that I've taken from adventure and putting yourself out there, and, you know, is I always ask myself in any situation, is it life-threatening or is it the end of the world? And I've never answered yes to either. So straight away, it reduces my drama queen moment. And I'm like, oh, Michelle, get with the program. It's not that bad. And know that when there's nothing left in the tank, there's 22 days minimum. When you think you got nothing else, you've at least got 22 more days.
Oof, that's powerful. It's true. Your 46 days when you were like,
Yeah, that's it.
Fantastic. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. I really look forward to, anyway, continuing your journey and following along, and I definitely will be. So thank you so much and have a great preparation.
Awesome. Thanks, Yvonne. Thanks for having me, Angel, and congratulations to you.